Guys, and welcome to today's video, where today I'm going to show you how to set up a minimum requirement tank for your Leopard Gecko. And I'm using Gizmo's old tank, hence why there's already dirt in here and all sorts. But I thought this would be a great opportunity to sort of show you how to set out a tank, especially if you're about to get a Leopard Gecko and you want to hit those minimum requirements. Now, the first thing you want to install, other than a background, if you want a background, you don't have to, this one just has one in, is a heat source. So whether you choose to use a heat mat or a ceramic heat emitter, deep heat projector, a halogen lamp, there's lots out there. Whatever you use, make sure you use a thermostat. Now we'll get into that in a bit, but I do have a video where I compare heat mats, ceramic heat emitter, deep heat projector, so if you're unsure what you want to use, check that video out. Heat mat's quite easy to install. Bit trickier in a vivarium, but fairly easy. If you're using a glass tank, usually heat mats need to go on the outside. Wooden vivarium, they go on the inside. If you're using an overhead heating source, you will need to get the fitting for that. So you can buy the bulb, but you do need to fit it, a fitting that you install above in the vivarium, or if you have a glass tank with a mesh top, that just pops on top. Now, as I said, regardless of what heat source you use, you need to use a thermostat. Now with a heat mat, you would use a mat stat with the deep heat projector, a dimming stat. If you're unsure what to use, Google it, or if the brand is pretty decent, it should tell you on their website what type of thermostat to use with it. It's just very important that you use one, because this is a thing that controls the temperature. So you put the probe on it or under it, depending on what heat source you're using. You can then set the temperature, and so ensure it doesn't get too hot. And some of these heat sources can heat up very quickly and can be very dangerous. For a Leopard Gecko, 90 degrees Fahrenheit is required. Now, do not get a thermostat mixed up with a thermometer, okay? Anyway, the thermometer, I would recommend a digital one with a probe, so you can put that in the area where the heat source is, where your Leopard Gecko will be lying on. So once again, if you have an overhead heat source where that Leopard Gecko will be laying on, put the thermometer there. If there's a heat mat, put it there. This will ensure you get an accurate reading of the temperature of where your gecko is lying. Don't use one of those analog ones that stick to the wall. They're pointless. Maybe they give you a reading of the air temperature, but certainly not what the temperature your gecko is being exposed to is. Also, you can use a laser thermometer, and I think it's good to have one of these on at all times, so you can always check, but these are also handy to just go around and double check. You can also have a thermometer on the cold side if you wish to get sort of the air temperature to the cold side, but it's very important you have it on the warm side. One thing you may have noticed is this tank is lit up. It has the 7% shade dweller in it. That's UVB. That's a whole different story, and though I do recommend it, I think it's a little complex for this video, and you can look into my reptile lighting and heating playlist if you want to learn more. We'll skip over that for now, but what we move on to now is substrate. Now there are many options for this. I use Earth Mix Arid. As I said, Gizmo's is very dry in here right now. We'll put a bit more in, but she hasn't been living in here for, must be a few months now maybe. I don't know, it's dried out very quickly. But I use Earth Mix Arid. I used to use Eco Earth. People use carpet, liner, tile, paper towel. Once again, unsurprisingly, I have a video comparing different setups. So naturalistic or a more sterile setup, bioactive, but I'm gonna just put a thin layer on. You would do something thicker, but I'll just do a thin layer for now. If you do use a loose substrate, do it thinner over the heat source if you're using a heat mat. If you are using tile or carpet, then you want to put your thermostat and thermometer probe on top of that, okay, so not stuck on the heat mat. Next is hides. So the first one is your hot hide. I always found log hides work quite well, but say you have a glass tank and maybe the gecko doesn't have a background, it might feel quite exposed, and a cave hide might be better over the heat source. So this would work well. If you're using deep heat projector or something like that, then maybe a hide made out of slate would work even better, but one of these hides will do with a heat mat. Next we want a moist hide, so a shedding hide. Something like this will work really well. You can also make your own. I used to always make my own out of cricket boxes, empty boxes that the crickets come in. That also works well. If you're putting it in, it's taking up a lot of space. What you can do is only put it in when you see that your gecko is going to shed. Now I'd say a moist or shed and hide is super important in a tank where you're just using paper towel or carpet or liner or tile. In a tank like this with loose substrate, what you can do is when you see your gecko's about to shed, you can mist the dirt a little, and with the heat and everything, it should kind of help. I will also say that my geckos have never really gone to a specific hide. They tend to use their entire enclosure. So for me, they usually have a hot hide and a cold hide, and when I see they shed, I mist it a little bit. But as I said, if you have a drier environment like a paper towel or something like that, definitely add a shed and hide in. And to put in there to, you know, help them shed, some people use sphagnum moss, or you can use a bit of eco earth or earth mix and just mist it when you need to. Sometimes you will find your gecko will favour this hide over the hot hide when you first move them in, because usually these hides are more cave-like and darker, so they feel a little more secure. Now for the purpose of the video, I will take this out, but remember, moist hide, it could be smaller than this, to be honest. As long as the gecko can get in, this one's quite big. Now the third and final hide you need is a cold hide. Now anyone who's been watching my channel for a while knows this used to be Ziggy's a very long time ago, and it's actually one of my favourites. It's from Terra. It's a decent size. You can take this bit off, fill that with sphagnum moss and dirt, so this could be used as a moist hide if you wanted to, instead of that other cave. But if you're just using it as a cold hide, you could put your paper towel in there, you could put a bit of soil in there. If you mainly want to use a non-moving substrate, but you also want to allow them to dig, to have that enrichment, this would be a great hide for that as well, because it has a little lip, so you can definitely fill it with dirt. They can go in there, dig to the heart's content, but you don't have to have that everywhere. Once again, great hide. They can also climb up on it. But yeah, so let's move that into the corner more. So that's your cold hide. I've just added this in, so this is the old cricket box. Usually I just cut a hole in here and that can work as a moist shedding hide. Also, in terms of placement where you put it, sometimes I put it midway between the heat and the cold. You know, as long as, because some people say if you put it in the cold, it could cause respiratory issues. I think if your gecko was continuously spending all its time in there and it was cold, that isn't great. But as I said, if you just missed it when they're gonna shed, then you shouldn't have an issue. Then you want to put in a water bowl. If you're having issues with humidity for some reason, then try a smaller water bowl. Just make sure you give them fresh water each day. Then you need a calcium bowl. Now this is, to be honest, this is still probably too big. A milk lid would do. I've seen some people put calcium in bowls this big, and you really don't need to. The calcium is there for your gecko to lick at if it needs it. I've rarely seen my geckos ever lick at the calcium, but sure, certainly like if you filled this up with calcium, it'd just be too much. It'd be a bit of a waste. So something little like that. In my tanks, I use the one from Strudy's. It's on Etsy, a little store from there. They're really handy. They don't get like tipped over or anything. But once again, you can make it out of just a bottle lid. And then if you want to add decoration, and this isn't part of the requirement at all, it's really to just jazz it up, you can add in some fake plants if you're not going bioactive. Just stuff them there. I remember years and years ago, I was showing off some of my gecko tanks, and they had, I don't know, just like a hanging leaf plant. It was more of a tropical plant, I guess, and someone said that's so bad because geckos come from, they said desert at the time, it's arid grasslands really. They said it's not suitable for a gecko like that. When it comes to plastic plants, your gecko doesn't notice the difference. It's just plastic. They don't even recognize them as plants. So you could literally add whatever fake plant in here. It won't matter. It's only when you add in the real plant, so you have a plant that requires high humidity and you put it in a leopard gecko tank and you try to replicate that environment when trying to also replicate an arid environment, you'd have a problem. Fake plant wise, you can put whatever you like in here as long as it's safe. But yeah, so that's a really simple minimum setup, I guess. Obviously the background took up a bit of the room. I usually have a bit more, but background's optional. I will say though that if you're noticing your gecko's hiding a lot, and especially if you have a glass tank, it might be worth covering the back and the sides, whether you put a paper background on the outside of the tank or on the inside, or go for a 3D background. I just think it adds a little more security, and I think that's why vivariums can work quite well with leopard geckos, just because it does feel secure. But overall, as long as you've got these 3 hides, a water bowl, a calcium dish, and obviously your heat source, and you're controlling it, you should be good. So if you take these pointers and expand from there, you know, you can just keep getting better and better. So I hope this video has helped. If you haven't already, please subscribe, especially if you're new to leopard gecko keeping. I have over 700 videos, and they're all in playlists if you want to find certain things, or you can just search it on the channel, type in a keyword, and the video should come up. But yeah, thank you for watching, guys, and goodbye.